So I did.
There I heard a talk by Nevin Sayer of the Fellowship of Reconciliation. That was a national Christian pacifist group at that time. It's religious still, but not specifically Christian. And I heard there the story of a complete nonviolence, not just being opposed to war, but to consider nonviolence as a way of living and a way of accomplishing social change. And so that was kind of crucial to me, that conference, because a few years later I quit my job in Akron, and I sold my car and my golf clubs and my bowling ball, and I went to New York to work for the FOR I think my salary was $23 a week. And that was a great experience for me. I learned a great deal. It was constant activity. I lived with some young women from the office who had a shared apartment, and so my whole life was focused in on the program of the FOR. And it was there at the water fountain on the third floor of the office building where the New York FOR had their offices, where Ernest was working, and where I had my desk in the national office, that we got acquainted.
Now, there's a Quaker, John Woolman, that had his ways of getting rid of slavery. He went around convincing individual Quakers till after 100 years, Quakers had pretty much unanimously agreed slavery was wrong. Most of them freed their slaves. Now, you might say, well, 100 years is a horribly long time, but the funny thing was, after that 100 years, it was still 100 years before slavery was ended. Quakers have a phrase, speaking truth to power, and I think that's one of the things we try to do, and go as individuals or as groups sometimes to speak to people in authority. The Quakers even went and had a confab with Hitler or his deputies.
Seek truth and follow where it leads. And if you really look, you can find the truth, and if you really are determined to do so, you can follow that truth to where it leads.
But to move in and say that if you don't accept my interpretation of the Bible as being the only infallible rule of faith and practice, then that puts you in a real bind when you try to square many of the teachings of the Bible over against Jesus' life and his love of his enemies and his caring as he did about peace and his great indignation with the practice of injustice and the poor being hurt. And people who say, well, they believe in the Bible literally, they ignore what Jesus said when he said, it hath been written of old, but I say unto you, love your enemies and do them good. Pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. And because if we take that little interpretation of what's Bible worshipers, I would say, then we can find grounds for doing anything we want to. Well, I believe that the whole emphasis for those who, the great teachers, has been to follow truth, not to blindly follow the state. I know that often over the years, particularly when I was in my struggle with the Presbytery of Cincinnati and was finally removed as a minister by the Presbytery of Cincinnati, I would talk to people and they would say, well, but didn't Jesus say at render unto, when the coin was brought and they saw the image of Caesar on it, didn't he say, render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's? And 9 times out of 10, they'll stop there. And I ask, and what else did he say? He didn't say, render unto Caesar your conscience. He said, render unto God the things that are God's. And I think that it's tragic in terms of bringing around a change in society and a more moral order, that people often will do what they believe is morally right up to whether or not they're going to disobey a law. And then the laws of the state have priority over where their conscience was leading them if they had allowed their conscience to continue to lead them.
The Christian people, we go back to what you asked me before, ought to be marching for peace more than people in the street, because we're supposed to be directed by godly forces. And I have said many times that I think the best type preaching is one who can preach on Sunday and picket or protest on Monday if necessary. And so I would suggest that the pulpits over this nation, particularly the white ministerial pulpits, would become more concerned about and challenge people more about what they do during the week than just whether or not, or how beautiful their services are or their rituals are on Sunday. It may be that God is getting tired of some of that. And he said, like in the first chapter of Isaiah, I'm tired of your oblations, I'm tired of your rituals, I'm tired of this. I want you to tear your hearts now, not your garments. I want you to put some of what you say in action. And even Jesus himself said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? Don't love, don't care for the poor, don't care for others. So I think we belong together.
Well, as far as Christianity is concerned and my conception of it, I think a Christian is probably a person who takes the life of Jesus seriously. And all we know about the life of Jesus is what we read in the Gospels, in the New Testament. And I suppose a Christian, by definition, would be one who tries to follow what Jesus did in his life, what we know of it, and what he taught, including, of course, the Sermon on the Mount and everything else in the Gospels that describe Jesus as a person and what he said, what he thought, and what he wanted people to do, and why the people that he chose followed him, and what they did. And it seems to me beyond that we can't go very far in defining a Christian. If we tried to, we would get all mixed up with the different centuries of Christianity, the different doctrines in the various multiple churches, and in all the sects right down to the present. Each sect seeming to believe something different or having a certain dogma or article of faith quite different from another. And some denominations really at loggerheads or swords' points about these doctrines. And I never really got into those things very far, because it seemed to me that as a Christian, I would be trying to follow faithfully what I thought Jesus would do in the situation that I happened to be in. And so I didn't wrestle too much with all these doctrines and didn't get into one side or another of these controversies. Some of them, of course, were going on in seminary, but we didn't hear so very much about those things there.
Certainly during the Vietnam War, there was no question but what the big emphasis was on militarism and on the nuclear bomb. There was a time when we had a supply of sleeping pills. So if the really a nuclear war started, we were prepared to just not deal with it, because there was no point in going on in that kind of a world in our minds. But to only deal with that part of the world problems wouldn't be sufficient, because if people have to have a decent life, and it takes a lot more than an absence of bombs